started now. There we go. And I should be running live now, I believe. Boom, 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 ba dum, boom, ba down. And so we'll just do the same as we have been doing, right? I'll just go about.
Yeah, keep it up with your UI stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Let's do it.
yeah. And then I'll just go through from just kind of building things up as we go. And then if people have questions, if anybody that's watching has questions, you can just kind of ask as I go along. And we're going to make some sweet art.
Cool.
Arts. Cool.
Tight, tight.
Tight. You ready to go?
Yep, let's do it.
Awesome. Do you need to see my screen or can you see it through the live feed?
I like to check out your screen, but if you don't mind.
Yeah, so you want me to
Alright,
share
good to
mine?
see you. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
You're so needy, dude. Damn. All right. Can you see it through the Hangouts?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to week 2, 3. I can't remember. This is going to just be a continuation, basically. What I'm doing now is I'm just kind of opening my computer to everybody so that you guys can see what it is that I do on a daily basis when it comes to designing and developing user interface elements for feature films. A lot of this really comes down to the requests of the script and the director and the production itself. So when I make these things up, I'm just kind of going through the process of how I make the tools, and it's not solving another really big part, which is interactions with your client and stuff. And these are very dynamic things that there's no real right answer. And when I teach you these things, and if you're learning it from me or whoever you're learning these things from, also yourself, I would say seek out as many bits of feedback as you can possibly. And well, I'll be completely honest, if you're not aware of my story personally, is that before I got into doing this kind of stuff, it wasn't even aware what UI was. I remember even asking my friends, like, what is this, and it's more or less, I just kind of, you don't need to know all the rules necessarily. You just have to have an imagination and a craftiness about how you solve problems. So it's more of a way of thinking fundamentally than anything else, if you can think of it like that. So I'm just going to go back into, this is our base working file. And when I make files personally, there's many different ways to make files. Right now I'm using Adobe Illustrator. And when I make files, you can make, like, for me personally, the way I like to work is I treat my file like one massive artboard, basically. So I'll have this massive space, basically. And if you want, you can zoom out. I hit Command minus or plus to do that, or you can hit the Command space bar, and you can zoom in and out as you drag your mouse back and forth. I kind of just do it like the Command plus or minus, just so I can see what I'm doing. So here we go. We have this section, and what I can do is, if I'm making something, what I like to usually do is crop the artboard, and there's this little tool right here. Again, to the designers behind creating the architecture of Adobe products do quite an amazing job with just thinking about how we work and how people learn and stuff. And although they can always be better, that's pretty great. And if you hover your mouse over a tool icon, you can see right here, it's Shift-O is the hotkey for it. So one thing I told you guys that I like to do is I never use them. I like to just kind of use my hotkeys to get me around. I don't like to just waste time going back and forth all over the place because this is wasted opportunity. So from what I understand, say cancel. If you want to get out of that artboard, you just hit the little angle, the arrow right there. From what I understand, this is your artboard basically, which is I believe like 10,000 by 10,000 or something, or even more than that. I think the newest version has quite a large artboard. So, but again, it's vector based, so it doesn't really matter what you make. But when I make my elements, I have everything set to the grid and to the world scale basically. For example, like this stuff, if you look closely, this should be to the grid. Yeah, it is. And what I mean by following the grid is that if I go and hit Command Y, if you remember, this is something I showed you guys last time, is if you hit Command Y, you can see through all the vector data. So your your strokes and everything in your fills become transparent. You can see where they line up, and if we go really close into here, you can see that it's lining up with the grid. And again, for me personally, you can choose whatever you like. Again, it helps you develop your own style by having your own solutions to do things. But for me personally, I like to use the grid, and it's a huge device to really help you understand and see things clearly in your design.
Somebody asked, how much does personal artistic style come into play with UI design? Is it more about the technical side, or is it personal style, or does personal style considered when a designer is is it considered when a designer is hired?
Yeah, this is a great question, and thank you for asking it. I think for the most part, when it comes to personal aesthetics and design, for me, I guess I can only use me as a case study, and I would say we're talking completely about only fictional film-based UI. We're not talking about user interface in our everyday life, which is completely different from what I do in film. I wouldn't want the UI that I design in the film to be what I interact with on a daily basis. But I think, yeah, having your own artistic and creative vision, it really helps. I think it helps, at least for me. I know it helps me because whether I was aware of it or not, I was able to develop my own style from just repetition and constantly working and perfecting my craft and really honing in on what it is that I'm trying to convey. So I think, having your own style is incredibly important. And style for me personally comes from repetition and practice. The more that you put in time to practice your craft, the more your style becomes, it reveals itself basically. And so I think that for me, it's been about the amount of time that I've put into my craft, being able to go like, I like this and I don't like this. I like the way this works and I like the way that doesn't work. I'm going to do this, more of this. I'm going to do less of that. And I think that's going to come about more or less from your ability to, see what works for you in your own flow. And again, too, every project's going to help you define who you are. So when I'm working on, say, Ender's Game, the responsibilities I had with that, with designing an operating system that exists on this like make-believe ship, to respect the quality that the world that they're trying to build, I have to treat it somewhat realistically and think about the vision behind it. But I have to also kind of concept and think about a way of them interacting with this whole system, basically. And so, working on that project to help me discover really what I like and what I don't like, and then working on other projects like I am now, it's just more of an evolved version of that. But every project is tailor-made to the tasks in which the client or person is asking for it. But for me personally, I think I like to differentiate my style between each project. I still work in the grid or close as I can to it, but for the most part, I like to add a little bit of different style or flavor to them, and that just comes from being able to know what ingredients that I'm working with. And again, I think all of this is just time. Like the reason why I do this, or I've been able to figure this out, is because I've spent countless hours just kind of playing around with it because I enjoy it. I really enjoy design. I think I enjoy it just as much as I do like learning new things because it's so much fun. You have your core fundamental ingredients, and then you can take those core ingredients and elaborate on them and find other, ways of using these ingredients to create a wealth of different information and different things. So I know that was a long-winded answer. I hope that works. Let me read over that question again just to make sure I got it. How does personal and artistic play in UI design? So yeah, I mean, for me personally, my own artistic style it's really important when somebody hires me. I think they look at my ability to. I think one of the things that I've heard many times from like a director or producer when talking about the reasons for hiring me is my ability to really bring something like with a lot of depth and something that looks like it's been really well thought of, and the layers, and then not just the layers of detail, but also being able to negotiate and navigate the details so that still there's something quite important that's shining through. So I think that's important, and I think that's part of what keeps me getting hired. So, and then is it more technical side or personal side? Um, and I think the other part of your question is it more about a technical side or a personal style considered when designer is hired? I mean it's a good question, but it's a loaded question because I think it really just depends on so many different factors that I couldn't really give you a yes or no or a direct answer because it's so variable and it changes so much, you know. So, but everything that I do and that I'm teaching you and showing you guys is just stuff that I've learned along the way, that I've taught myself or I've found out from a friend, and these are things that I've applied to myself. But again, I think I've pride myself in my ability to problem solve. I think that at the end of the day, it's really about solving problems. When it comes to designing things for films, you're catering to the story and then the nature of the story itself, and how good you do that defines really your ability to continually be gaining work, basically. So.
Another question for you is how do you choose a color theme when
How
going into color?
how do I choose a color theme? Well, I'm gonna definitely get into the color thing, but one of the things is, this is a harder thing for me to teach, and these are great questions. And John, if you could do me a huge favor, any of these like really good questions, could you just document them? Because I'm gonna, again, as I mentioned to you guys, I think my next class with Learn Squared is gonna be showing you guys how I approach the very world of designing HUDs and graphic user interface, and it's quite a broad subject. As simple as it is, it's quite broad. And this is a good question because for me, I'm quite weird with color. I'm a slight bit colorblind. When I was a kid, I was dared to look in a flashlight, and I'm kind of a weird kid, so I just did it, and then I think it damaged my eye. I think that's what it was. I can see okay, but I think I have a problem distinguishing purples and blues, and then spectrums of, I think, orange and reds are a little off for me. So I think, that said, I think that my perception of color is a little bit shifted from the average person. But when it comes to color, it's a very complicated thing, I think, in regards to UI. If you start adding too much color to your stuff, it becomes this massive, like, what I call a fruit salad, and I try to avoid it at all costs, So one of the things I try to do is try to find what color I want to be the most important color, the most dominant color, the color which is like what I'd consider to be the call out color, which is, for this one, for example, would be probably the yellow because it's most dominant. If I squint my eyes, or like if we want to quickly make this black and white, we can see in a value tone like what's strongest. And if we look here in black and white, if you squint your eyes and look back, the yellow is most dominant value wise, and it's also the strongest visually. So in this design, for example, I would pick yellow to be my dominant color, and I would use this element to support that, and then everything else would be a secondary to that. I never took color theory. I never really focused on that stuff. I kind of fly my way through this experience until I find something that I like and that I work with well. A common trait for people, I think, is to just turn everything to teal for UI. And I think the reason why is because it's appealing and it's soft on the eyes, and it helps us see things, that are complex without being overrun with information. But again, as you look at this example, there's quite a bit of detail here, but it can all be read in different sections and stuff. And it doesn't have to be necessarily teal. And that's something I've been really trying to fight away from my own self, to not keep everything teal. And I think I've been trying to do that ever since I started. So it's tough though. It's a tough battle fighting that teal. What's up, John?
Another question going into color says, any
Sure.
chance you could discuss your approach to building color palettes? Do you have a process that helps reassure your decisions in the same way as using a grid helps with with the layout decisions,
That's a
I
great
guess.
question too. Yeah, John, if you could please, that'd be awesome if you could document this or like make a Google Doc and share it with me. Because what I'm going to do is when I design the class, I'm going to use all your guys' awesome questions and then make sure that they're in the lessons, because my goal as a teacher is to answer as many of these as possible. And to be honest, a lot of this stuff is just self-taught, and these are things that I've learned along the way. So they're kind of hard for me to explain, because I feel like it's, when somebody asks you like, hey, how do you breathe? And it's like, well, I don't know, you just breathe, it's common, but it's because you've been doing it for so long, so it's become second nature. For color, when I pick things, when I pick a color, for example, so I'm in Illustrator, I'm going to just grab this element right here, I'm going to copy, Command C, and I'm going to go into Photoshop. I'm going to make a new document. Let's make this like, I don't know, just for this, I'll just make it 4K. Let me change the mode to RGB. Since all my stuff is going to be digital and on movies and web, I'm just going to keep it RGB because that's the color space. You can also adjust and play with 16-bit channel if you want, or you can go into 32-bit as well. For the most part, I usually work in about 16-bit. So what I did here is I have my background, I just duplicated it and I inverted it so it's now black so we can see the color. And I'm going to hit Command C. And when I hit Command C, it's basically a command from the last copy command I send my computer, which is said inside Illustrator, copy this element. And now that I'm in Photoshop, it communicates to Photoshop and it asks me, I have 4 different versions. I can drop it in as a shape layer, a path, pixels, and smart object. When I'm working on something, I usually will send in a smart object and I'll up-res it basically. I'll bring it over here and I'll make a duplicate of it, Command J. And I will make this one underneath it invisible. And then here on this layer, if I go in here, if I hit B, I just want to rasterize this element right here. So I hit OK. And I'm just going to invert it by hitting Command I. And what I'll do now, and again, this is a very rough version of what and how I would work and do this. So I'm showing you like I'd make my element inside of Adobe Illustrator, then I'd bring it into Photoshop, and this is the process in which I do that. Then I hit Command U, and I will hit Colorize, and Command U brings up the prompt for hue saturation. And when I hit Colorize, basically what that's going to do is allow me to lower the values of lightness, add the saturation. And the reason why I do it like this is because I can take my element and quickly get every spectrum as I want, and I can try it all on the fly. So if I'm thinking about, again, everything comes from the principle. And I think when I design the class, I'll have to do it similar to my other classes where it's all based on a project, and I'll create an artificial project so that we're following something that's very much similar to the way that I actually practice my work every day, which is using a script or something to use that element basically. So the next thing I would do is hit Command J, and then I'd move this up here, and I'm just duplicating it. So I'm holding Shift and I'm moving it, and I hit Enter, and then I hit Command U, and I'm going to go to Colorize. I'm going to drop this down and bring up the saturation and just adjust things as I go. And I'll hit OK, and I will try like a screen mode of say screen, and then maybe I will shift this off by hitting the arrow keys and kind of move these around. And then I'll just kind of try and find a spot where I want these to live together harmoniously. And there we are. And then I'll just kind of go through here and start augmenting and switching things as I go, until I find like a rhythm that I want and that matches and fits the property in which I'm creating. And then eventually, as we get to here, we'll have these what I consider like your tier 1 elements, and then your tier 2, and then your tertiary like tier 3, which are fillers, textures, and elements that are on the scale of value are diminished, whereas you have these other ones that are much more dominant. But once you add those multiple layers to your work, it's almost like, if you were to design like a shader for a material, the more layers and understanding you have, the more tactile and intangible it is, the more visual feedback it gives to somebody, and therefore they feel like there's something of worth behind the element itself, which is really cool. So, and that's just, that's a whole another aspect of UI design, because And the fictional stuff, like you can make it as simple and bare bones as you want. You could just be like very simple, or it can have multiple levels of depth and insanity like this. Let's say this would be, for example, like a screen graphic or something. Then we would have to figure out like, okay, in this scene, we would have this element happening, and then the character or the actor would interact with it, and it's helping them search a location or something like that. And so I think when I design the class, I'm going to have to come up with the project and then come up with beats of the projects, which are going to be tasks that need to be taken care of. And then we'll have everything to apply to it. That's more of a logical approach that I'm going to have to take. So yeah. So again, a lot of these questions, I'm answering them as best as I can, and they might be a little long-winded. I apologize if they're not super direct and precise, because a lot of this stuff comes from me, solving things as I go. And that comes from me finding my own personal style, which takes a little bit of time. And you guys will all get there if you want to, if you're interested in this stuff enough. There's a huge market, I think, for not only just for film, but I think also getting into, say, like the VR realm, designing UI that exists in the altered space would be really interesting. And how that all looks and how it works is all part of it. So. But yeah, depending on what it is and the task that I'm making, I'll shift these colors around, and then I can also take this element and hit Command U and drop its lightness down a little bit if I want this to be like a secondary, and just kind of start shifting things around until I get a basic setup that I like. You can keep everything in the same color family if you'd like. You can keep everything in the warm color family and the reds and yellows, or you can shift them into the greens and blues and have that as well. It's more or less like a decision that you would need to make in order to find what the project needs. So again, it all kind of comes down to the project. And these are designed, like these elements, these things that I made quickly were things that I just made freestyle. It didn't have anything to do with a script or anything. So yeah, hope that makes sense. What's up, John?
Someone has a two-part question.
Sure.
Says, the first part is, what technical skills do you think a designer should have nowadays to be an asset, i.e. 3D, motion, etc.? Says to be an asset.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what skills do I think that you would need? That's a question, right? I mean, again, I don't know what you would need. I know what I need, and I'll use that as an example. For me, I have a trajectory that might be different from you personally, but my skills require me to communicate clearly, be able to design and use every tool that I can get my hands on, which all the tools I'm using are slowly, I'm advancing in all of them slowly. I think a really good understanding of how, the basic tools like Photoshop is a really great tool for conveying, two-dimensional projects or images. Using, if you're going to use any kind of form of design, I think being able to understand InDesign is a helpful tool for layout and stuff. And I think also for me, like using Adobe Illustrator is a really great tool to understand and use. And to be completely honest too, as I've been using it for so many years, there's a lot of features in here I just don't even play with or try. I don't really, I just use what I need it for, and then I get out of it. And that's how I use every program too. I use a little bit of something and I get out of it. I use ZBrush a little bit for these certain things, and I'll go into 3D Coat, and then I'll go back into like DAZ 3D, and then I'll go back into Cinema 4D. For me personally, I mean, I'm trying to do so many different things. I would say, try and use every program you can. But I think in just regards into only design, I would say, have a good foundation of what design grid is, how the grid works. That really helps. Read any and as many books as you can. I think that's one thing I mentioned I was going to do last time and I didn't do. I apologize. Was give you guys some books, a list of books. I can probably do it towards the end of the episode if John reminds me, and I can look at my shelf and kind of like kick you guys some notes. You guys can see them, and there'd be some good design notes. I believe, let me see if on the Collective podcast we have books on there, because people have asked a lot about the books I read, and I think I have a list of books here. I guess I don't have my design books in here though too. So there's some design books in here. So John, could you help me? I'm gonna send you this link if you could share it with everybody. That way everybody has it. That's just a few. I'll give you some more, but these books are really great. Layout workbook is a lot of fun because it's cool to see how things are working. Stop Stealing Sheep is more or less like a mentorship guide to just being able to produce work and be a designer without, getting destroyed. I believe that's what that book is. Making and Breaking the Grid is a very good entry level book to grids and understanding the math of them and why and how they work and how they're a part of design itself. Because, design is actually just seeing. It's the way you look at things, and it's the elements in which you use to communicate your ideas. At its core, design, when it's done well, is just conveying ideas seamlessly, basically. Layout Essentials is really great. Type Addicted is fun. The trademark logo types too. I've only gone through this briefly, but this is cool. It's a fun book. It's more or less for inspiration. So there's some inspiration. Here's some usable workbooks. These three up on the upper this side are all usable workbooks. And then I will share some more. But in here you can see on that link that John shared, you can go directly to the books themselves, and they'll take you to Amazon if you want, because that's where I buy all my books. I get them all off Amazon pretty much. And my room is like strewn with books all over the place. So, but yeah, I'd say have a good foundation. Teach yourself. You can teach yourself. I mean, there's so many elements of education out there. Learn Squared is one, and there's so many other ones that are really awesome. There's a lot of really great resources. So any of those things is really important. And then fundamentally, just understanding what it is that you're trying to say and how you're trying to communicate things. If your goal is to be a designer, again, as I said, from my perspective, a great designer is just a facilitator for communication visually, and being able to do that, not just visually, but in many different realms and elements to put that all together. So, and a great design is something that's timeless and is conveying the information in which it needs to. So, yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Going on to the second question, it says, I'm building a brand new portfolio to switch from your traditional graphic design studio to getting into the entertainment industry. Can you point out what sort of content I should have and how much of it?
So they want to go and do more like design stuff rather than they want to do instead of entertainment stuff. Is that what it is?
Right. Getting away from your traditional graphic design.
Oh, and they
Going
want to
into
go
the
into entertainment stuff.
industry.
Okay. Yeah. If you don't have any work or clients or anything from there, this is a question that got asked last time, which I think is a really great question too. It's very applicable because a lot of you out there are either working in the industry or want to switch your role in the industry and want to try something else. And you want to use your skills to pivot and switch up your obligation. So switch it so that you can do whatever you want. If you're in a position where you don't have, you can follow my kind of same ways. Like if you're in a position where you don't have necessarily like the elements from a job to get you more work, I would say what you should do is pick your favorite film, or basically what it is doing fan art and the core of it, which is just taking something from an existing property that you really like and then making some sort of art element that would pertain to it so people can go, oh, okay, like this makes sense, And so for example, when I first started out in the industry, when I was working at a design studio and I wanted to get into the entertainment industry, what I did is I looked at all the work out there, and then I looked at all the studios that I liked and what work they were creating, and then I went and made my own projects, and some of them were complete tributes to entities that are existed, and some of them were just me trying to make my own fiction. And then thankfully I was really thankful and surprised after spending 3 months of working on my own portfolio. I got hired from Prologue, and then I went and started my career, and the rest is history. I'm here with you guys today. So I think if you're interested in doing that, you're gonna have to put in some time, but I would say do the design of the things that you like most. So because especially right now, it would be more or less a passion project. And I would also say a great piece of advice that I actually learned from Nick Campbell is like, I think he did a podcast a long time ago that I really enjoyed, when he basically said, like, only do the work that you want to do, and don't produce and promote and show and share people the work that you don't want to do. For example, if you're, producing, let's say you want to only farm, papayas, but you keep selling apples, everybody just gonna think you're selling apples, but you really want to sell papayas. You have all these papayas that you want to sell. So why would you continually like show apples, basically? So like I've met people that are like, I want to do this, and then I look at their site and I go, well, everything you have doesn't represent what you're talking about, what you want to do. So what you have to do is go and put some time in on yourself and make your own passion projects, proper, legitimate, high level fan art, basically. Or you can create your own elements to show people that you have a brain between your ears and you can think externally and have your own ideas and stuff. So because that's really going to be the thing that's going to help differentiate yourself from everybody else. And don't just use the same things. I mean, unless it's something that you really love and find fascinating, but try other things, try other entities that don't really exist. I was talking with a friend of mine today, and it's quite funny because if I go to my work and I look back at it and we were talking about something, I don't know why we were talking about it, and he was reminding me of this project that I did. This is a project I did just for fun, taking all these skills and things that I had learned from Prologue, and then I made my own concept of a game called a game version of Medal of Honor, and I just called it The Forefront. And I thought it'd be interesting if it was like, this is quite long ago too, it's before I guess the games are all quite going in this realm. And it was weird looking back at it, but again, I just kind of went crazy and I built this all up for myself and a narrative behind it, and this whole idea of how like you're scanning through the eye of the soldier and he's going through the weapon and blah blah blah, and there's all these cut sequences going back and forth and explosions. And anyways, I think this thing got like, I was on Kotaku, it was like, it went crazy, it went everywhere, and I've seen it being ripped off and used all over the place. It's quite funny. So but again, this was a passion project I did when I was very, very new to all this stuff. So yeah, it was fun. It was cool. So I would suggest doing stuff like that. A lot of my projects, they kind of started like that, or they all kind of coalesced and began from me just wanting to try things and explore things and having the interest and desire to make things on my own. And then that attracts the client work. That project I just showed you guys is a project that, as you can see, it has UI elements. It has some of these things. You see these little grids and stuff. I just went through and took all these things and made my own frame. See all the grid here and all those elements? That's all from Illustrator. All this stuff is from Illustrator, and then I just combined it all into Photoshop. All the stuff in the eye, it's all the same stuff that I'm doing. It's just different fragments of it. So, and then putting it all together into a piece. But I think this piece has got me a lot of jobs, probably from way back when. It's so old though. I look at it, I'm like, oh, old work. But it's cool. It's cool though.
It's awesome.
Yeah, fun times. But that's my best advice. Is just go and find something that you love or you're interested in or curious about, or that you would get you a job, and just like focus on that and go from there. And then before you know it, you'll be working with those people. I guarantee it. If it's good enough, you'll be working with them. You'll be fine. So.
Next question for you says, how do you balance the visual representation part with the understanding part of it? I mean, everything you represent, it has purpose, a significant understanding to the scene/story you are working on.
Yeah, I think, I guess I got to use a lot more case studies. So let's say in regards to UI, and that's absolutely right. When you get into a project, you have to believe and live and experience the fiction in which you're creating for. So let's use Prometheus, for example, and this is a very quick job. And these are the concepts. These are the style frames from the concept. The brief came in, and the brief was quite small, but it was really great. It was really well thought out and stuff. But they had this idea of this interface in which David, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the film, David goes on the ship and he interacts with it, and it's basically like this device that he uses. It's a transparent projected device that he uses as kind of like this voice of humanity that's going out to the possible location that they're going to visit, and he's just trying to see if there's been any kind of feedback back from it. And obviously there hasn't, but what I had done is taken that base idea and then started to break it down into sections. So I started to think about like, well, if this was like a projection, then maybe the projection has like sections of edges and how the edges all work and line up together. And my idea originally was to, let's see if I can find it. You can see it in the final film. On the side here, I was thinking it'd be really interesting because I believe, if I can remember right, the brief called for these elements on the side, or the data would float up to the top like bubbles in a champagne bottle. So it'd be like all floating up and kind of cascading up. And I thought it would be really interesting if the side elements would tick-tock in the kind of like in an interesting fashion. And as it did, it would propagate and kind of birth out the data from the left side. So I'm thinking about the engineering behind it and all the thoughts behind it. This was the final image was created by Ilya and oh man, I can't remember the guy's name. He's a really talented guy too. They took all this stuff and kind of hodgepodge the mix between what I had created and what Ilya had created, and they went and made it in motion and designed it. My project, or my part of the project, was just to design elements to gain the trust and help win the project, basically, and taking all these elements from Mankind and key moments from Mankind, things that they could get a hold of, like space travel and Da Vinci, the Perfect Man, and all these kind of different elements, and putting them all together. Moments from wars and different traveling things, and just kind of adding all this madness, and then also showing how it's all produced in depth and stuff, just to have that really interesting refined version of itself and stuff, and just respecting that narrative. And then just the construct of it, again, you guys see it's all the grid is all connected. The grid is almighty. So and this is back when I first started using the grid and using it and seeing its power, and it's getting even more powerful for me personally. And also just I was making for these, it was more or less designing the style of how things kind of come on, they animate and they project and they turn on. So showing them how it turns on and off and how it looks, and so you can see bits of the data and the grid. So and then also volumetric for areas that kind of feel like they're being projected as well. So thinking constantly about the design of it and how it would be interacted with and all that kind of stuff, and how the volume would play a role in it, and the importance of having all this stuff going together. And so it's problem solving at its best, and using design as an element to help problem solve. So, and yeah, props to the team at Prologue for just producing it. Just outstanding. It's really beautiful. The final stuff is really great, and it was so cool to see elements from my file in there and stuff, and finally got to check off a book from my bucket list, being able to work on a Ridley Scott film, even for just the little bit that I had a chance to. But it was awesome.
Yeah. It's cool. Next question says, for the movie title sequences you create, like Sherlock Holmes, do you only create the stills, keyframes, or are you responsible for the motion graphics / animation as well? The Sherlock Holmes title sequence is one of my favorite title sequences you have created. If you just do the stills, how do you communicate the transition between frames?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you. Yeah, for the most part, my role, and as I designed and started in the industry, was about taking the requests of the client or the director or whatever in their film, and then taking those elements and going, okay, your film's about a detective and all this stuff, and then creating a world of design, really thinking about the ideas and coming up with this style and a system that works. And from this element, what I would do for this one, I was working with Danny Ont, and Danny reached out to me to see if I could pitch some more ideas and frames, because Danny knew that I drew, and so Danny reached out to me. So this is something that Danny would eventually take on and go and make. This is for Sherlock Holmes, I believe the second film. I can't remember if there's a name. I think it's Sherlock Holmes 2, I guess. But it was just me drawing these things out. And so the next phase of that would be to work with somebody who is really talented with motion design. Like I would say I'm really decent with design. I would work with them. And then that's a long process of just a lot of back and forth, like going, okay, it starts with here. And then I would just go through and really sit closely with that person and talk about, it starts here, right here, and this all draws on and it kind of scatters off. And then we move up modularly up through the pages. And as this comes on, this frame draws in, and then his name kind of comes together, and then we push through that and we go to here, and I just start talking about how we would navigate from scene to scene as we go from one thing to the next, and how the logos come up or the type comes up. Every time you look at something like this, rarely, if ever, is it just one person designing these things. There's usually teams and teams of people. In regards to like video games, there's thousands of people behind them. In regards to title design work, it's a much smaller team, but there's still teams. There's somebody who's the producer, there's somebody who's the director, there's somebody who's the creative director, the designer, motion, 3D. Like there's usually a team of at least 4 to 5. It's very rare when you have just one person, like say Raul Marx, who can take all of it together and just do it all himself, which is like, he's very much in a league of his own, which is awesome. But yeah, it's mostly a team of people. And everybody's role in this is very important. They're all integral. I think they're all quite connected, from the producer to the person who's animating it. It's all very connected. And the smaller the team, usually the better, as long as it's within range and everybody's talented and knows their skills. But yeah, so hopefully that answered that. Yeah. Cool.
Another question.
Sheesh.
Do you want me to just keep them coming, or do you want to get some more?
It's okay. I can answer the questions. I mean, again, more of it I don't mind answering any question, but we can keep it more geared towards like the UI stuff. I understand. You guys can ask whatever you want. I'll do my best to answer them, but yeah, I mean, I'll try to. I apologize. I think it's good that people are asking questions, and I'll get through as many of these as possible, and we'll just keep doing this until we make progress in it. So, but keep it going, guys. This is good.
Yeah, the next one says, sorry, this one's kind of broken up. It says Modo, Arnold, and Python. I do a couple hours for each every day. Can you talk about what you are learning nowadays and how much time you allocate for each?
That's awesome. Okay, there's a couple things that I do. When you're learning something, I think it's really important to have something to apply to it, because I've done a lot of learning, and I think when I go and learn these things, I find that I go and learn them and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I forget them. And I'm like, oh shit, how did I do that? And then I come back to it. It's cool to know it. But what I like to do basically is be able to take something and apply knowledge to it so that I can go and see the benefits of what it is that I'm making. So instead of just learning something, I'll go through and make like a project, for example. And this is something I'm going to share with you guys. I haven't shared with anybody yet. Actually, it's kind of cool. I'm going to share it with you guys, and something that I'm working on right now, and just for fun. And I'm teaching myself many different things. One of them is Octane. I've been teaching myself a lot of Octane stuff. The next thing is learning how to do stuff in 3D Coat, and then also learning how to use Fusion 360. So it's like all these things at once, but what I'm doing is I'm making a project that I can then use to teach myself as I go through it. So I have a certain type of eye, the way I look at things. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating these scenes, and it's a lot of fun. I'm making this with my friend Leo, who's awesome. And he's teaching me some cool stuff. But through the process, what I'm doing is I'm going, okay, I have this scene. So if I can share this with you, I would say like my first render was this, for example. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I figured out how to like take this chair element and make this material. And then I'm like, oh, the material looks okay. And then her skin looks okay. But then the helmet looks okay, but nothing really feels real. It's still very 3D feeling. So then I started to really understand like the depth of the lighting and the shaders and where I want the light to be, and how the how I had to figure out how to UV this kind of stuff and figure out where the texture goes and all that kind of stuff. And then learning from all my friends who were kind enough to share, their feedback and their advice with me. And so, in a nutshell, what I'm learning right now is many different things. I'm considering getting into V-Ray because I think V-Ray is probably the more superior, just due to its ability to make really great materials and fast and stuff. But I also love the speed of Octane. It gets annoying sometimes when it doesn't work. It just drives me nuts. So it's more or less like the way I like to learn is make a project and then use that as a device to learn and make something unique. This is the first time I'm sharing this with anybody. I was just going to keep it quite quiet. And for everybody out there, like, I have so much stuff going on, but I also make it a vital, important thing for myself, to be able to make my own stuff. And this is actually animated. It's all moving too, which is cool. So my goal is to be able to do kind of like what Raul Marx is doing, or like my friend Anthony. These guys are my friends, and they're doing such great work, and they're so prolific. I want to join that same ability, that team too. So here's this weird helmet and all kinds of weird stuff. So yeah, you guys are getting like a little look into like my own personal fun weird projects. So yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. But I would say, like, when you're learning these things, like for me, apply it like a project or a meaning to it. That way you can have like something that's applicable to your learning, basically, so that when you're learning it, it becomes a relevant use. And so when I was learning how to do those things, I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that, so I need to go and figure out how to do that. Or I don't know how to do that, I need to figure out how to do that. Like, I need to understand how to make a proper material or a shader. Then I need to go into the node editor inside of Octane and go and figure out how to make these shaders, and it's a whole just black hole, basically. But yeah.
Next question says, what was your approach at Ender's Game to create interactions? Was the script telling you, or did you come up with some of the interactions yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. In regards to Ender's Game, let's go up here so I can show Ender's Game stuff. I had been working on Ender's Game for such a long time. This is a long project. It's been years. I was on, I think, like 2 years or something, or a year and a half or something. And the cool thing is, they were awesome to work with. The crew was great. And so they brought me out to New Orleans to work with Asa. And what they had to have happen is that Ender does all these interesting moves and transitions inside the film, and they didn't want him just kind of like throwing his arms around and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So if you look over here, I went out to New Orleans, and this is my buddy Ryan Cashman. He's my close friend who I collaborate and do a lot of work with. He's awesome. Give a shout out to Ryan. So what I did was we created this library of moves, basically, that he could do. And then once we categorize those moves, we go, okay, this is what happens when you're opening up this massive gun, or this structure, this thing, or when you're zooming through or you're battling, or you're going through something, you have these moves that are choreographed, basically. So it's a very weird thing, if you think about it. We had to choreograph this thing, and poor Asa, he had to figure out. I mean, I guess that's why he gets paid the big bucks, because he has to remember all these things. But he was really great to work with too, and this is all part of the process of making these things. Oh, this looks horrible. Oh, it's stuck at 7. So but yeah, so for Ender's Game, it was more or less like, I'd make a frame like this, which would be just more key art, basically concept art. And it'd be like, oh, if Asa's inside his silo, or he's in his element, he's expanding out, basically. And then I'd make other keyframes like this, which would then support the actions of everything else. And I would share this with the director and production designer, and we'd all look at it and go, this is great. I really like this. I love the volume, the depth. And basically what it is to convey the consciousness of Ender. That was my whole goal, was to take Ender's chaotic mind and the childlike genius, and then create it so that the audience could see how complex it was for him, and how you would do these things and all that kind of stuff. So, and I would go all crazy. And again, as I said, it all comes down to your ability to problem solve and put all this stuff forth. And it's so funny because I only have shared a little bit here. I have so much for this project. Just I have about 600 files or so of just stuff like this. And I just put on whatever is on the website. So, but yeah, Ender's Game was a really interesting project. Again, it's like choreographing and working with the talent and creating a library of choreographed moves, basically. So it's like I'm like a dance teacher for UI. It was fun. Definitely interesting. Yeah, definitely interesting.
So we're approaching 11 minutes until 2. I don't
Yeah,
know if you
that's
want to,
fine.
because we have a lot of questions now wrapped
Okay,
up.
let's I guess I'll try to answer some of them quickly, and then we'll go through as many as we can, and we'll cap it off at 2 o'clock. Sorry I didn't get much work done today, guys. I think it's good to answer your questions, and maybe that's what most of this will be. And John and I will be cataloging the questions that will pertain mostly to UI and will help me when I design the actual class, so I can get you guys like the best possible class that I can. So
Yeah.
cool. Go ahead.
This question says, going back to the or your Illustrator workflow, what's the best workflow with layers? Do
Okay.
you keep everything in one layer or quite specific with groups and layers, etc.?
Awesome. Great question. So yeah, I do like to split it up. So if I'm making like an element, for example, let's say, and I do this especially when I'm working with my motion graphics artists that I'm working and building things with. If I were to grab, let's say, let me ungroup all this stuff. Let's say I wanted this element and this element to be a part of a group. I'll just go into my layers and I'll make a new layer right here by creating a new layer. And there's this little color tab next to it. I'll just drag this up to the next layer, and that basically will make that element completely separate from the other ones. And I use it mostly just to have groups on things, so I can go like, this is like tier 3 element, this meaning that this isn't a tier 1, it's just kind of like fodder, basically design fodder. And if you can make it invisible, and I can look at it quickly. And then if I wanted to go, say I'll lock this one up, and I'll grab maybe like this element, and I'll make a new layer, and I'll drag this here, and I'll go to tier 2 or 2. And then if I look at here and I just isolate it here, I can go, okay, that's that element, and I have that one as well. And now the next one I will take these off here, and I'll just grab this section here, and I'll make a new layer of that, and I'll say like, I'm just naming it randomly, but tier 1. And I usually kind of come up with names and stuff for these things as I go through it. But yeah, so then I can go into my layer and go and break it down, and it's more or less pertaining to whatever it is. I try not to make a layer with just our file with just one layer, because it's just that what doesn't help anybody. It just gets really chaotic. But if I have to break it up, I think this is a great question too, John. If you could document this one, this would be good, because that way I can really make sure I hit that, because I think that's really important. Groups and stuff and itemizing information. So then when I do pass this file off, my next partner that I'm working on it with would be my animator or whoever that I'm going to collaborate with. They will be able to instantly be able to see this, and they won't have to waste time on trying to find it. They can just they can spend their time doing what they do best, which is making it move and bringing it to life, which is awesome too. So yeah, hopefully that answered that. Cool.
Next one says, were you ever in a situation where you convinced a client that you had a better concept than the one that was demanded from the brief? Like it would support the story even better if they would do it your suggested way?
Yeah, that's a really complicated, that's a social game basically. First and foremost, when you're working on anything regards to clients and a director, you have to have respect for them and give them what they need and they're asking for. The way I design that situation is I'm much more action based. I don't say anything. I don't use my words to try and convey it. I use my abilities and my ability to design and make work. What I would do is I'd make their example, and then I'm just going to go to Photoshop. I'd make their example, and then I would also make my own. and I would say, hey, here's the thing you asked for, and then here's this thing, and then here's mine, and I'll let you decide, and I'll use my actions. It's all based on actions. Talk is cheap, so I wouldn't just say like, hey, that idea doesn't work. I would go and make, obviously always please them, because that's what you're getting paid for. And when you're doing that, it's important to know your place in the realm of what it is that they're creating. And a director is a very busy person, especially during the production of a film. So the last thing they want is somebody countering what they're trying to do. But the other thing you could do is just like extra credit, basically, and go, hey, so this is what you've proposed to me, and this is my solution to this thing, your request, and then here's mine. That's how I would do it, and that's how I've done it many times, and it always works. And 9 times out of 10, they'll go, oh, that's good. I think that's cool. Or it's a nice version of both. So what's the next one, John?
Next one says, so basically as a graphic designer now, I would like to switch to UI UX design. It's kind of like the question that was asked. He says motion graphic design. What skill sets I should acquire first when switching, and what program is relevant for today's industry?
Cool.
So it's kind of like the last question.
Kind of similar. Yeah, similar, but a little bit different, I think. I guess it all depends if you want to, like, there's many different routes you can take, and I would say, take my advice with a grain of salt. Again, I don't know all the answers, and I would suggest you go in and reach out to many different people for the answers. But at the same time, you can only know what you want. I have friends who just do animation, and the program they use the most is going to be After Effects for animation. It's a really robust, very strong program for animation. So if like that's the route you want to go. For me, for example, let's use me as an example. I use all kinds of stuff. I'll use MindNode for getting my ideas out. I use my sketchbook. These aren't programs, sorry, but I just wanted to let you know everything I use. I use a little bit of After Effects, very little bit. I don't use them much anymore. I just have my friends do that kind of stuff because they're much better at it than I am. I'm starting to get into 3D Coat. I use ZBrush very little. I use Cinema 4D mostly. I'm going to probably get into 3D Studio Max eventually. Start using a little bit of V-Ray. I use Octane. I use Photoshop, InDesign, Adobe Illustrator. These are just things that I use on a daily basis. I also use Google Chrome. Using the internet and stuff is really important. What else? I'm looking at my list of things here. I use Premiere a little bit. Let's see. Started using Lightroom a little bit. It's pretty cool. But for the most part, this is generally what I use. And I have 2 different platforms. I have a Mac OS X, and I use a PC from time to time. Begrudgingly, I do. So, and each one of these does separate tasks that I need. So that's me. But if you're wanting to get into the industry and what things to use, I would say, first and foremost, the most important thing that you need to use is your mind. And that comes from learning how to have your own style and taste, and that comes from time. But the most important thing is to not just look at Pinterest and the common places, but to also look inside in your mind and think about what great design is and research the past. And then when it comes to you actually making the work, once you have all that kind of figured out, the next thing you need to do is always be action oriented. But the next thing you probably want to get into is the programs, which I've listed here. These are great for design. It's like Photoshop is a must. Adobe Illustrator is a must. InDesign is really important. I think those are all the key design things that you can use, design programs. And then if you want to get into 3D, there's just so much. There's Modo, there's Cinema 4D, there's 3D Studio Max, 3ds Max, there's Maya. There's just so much. And then Then you have your render engines, which are really crazy. And this is such a massive mess, you know? I wish there was one tool that did it all, but it just doesn't happen like that. You have V-Ray and Octane, and you have like, there's so many. You have Corona. There's just like an endless amount, basically. So and that's more or less like what I would suggest to try and get into and see, you know, what works best for you and what your goals are, and just be very clear about your goals, because like you can instantly get lost in this stuff because it's so easy to kind of misplace your, you know, your footing, basically, because it gets really complex. So so cool, hopefully I answered that. What's the next one? And then maybe two more and then I'm good. I gotta
Okay.
jam out. Good questions, guys. Thank you for asking them. They're really great, and I think hopefully they're helping everybody out.
Yeah, and if you guys don't get your questions answered, we're going to be streaming next week too. So
Yeah,
join
baby.
us then.
Every week. Yeah, exactly.
This one says, in your modest opinion, the more complex graphics, the better, do you think?
No, not necessarily. You know, I think to answer that question is to ask what the purpose is. In film UI, it's again, as let's say I use Ender's Game for example. It's about creating complexity and emerging complexity and levels of complexity, because my goal was to design the consciousness of a child genius. So that's more or less solving that. And then my other stuff, I guess it's more or less like, I mean, I don't know if that's UI. I'm trying to find a way. Some of it is complex, but it all just depends on the task at hand. If you look at, say, like Dieter Rams, for example, which is like one of my favorite designers, I think I love the way that he thinks. It's all about simplicity. If you think about taking, it's like a circle. You unlock this layer here. We take like a circle, and the element of a circle, and using that to its, you know, whatever it might be that we need to do, it's more or less finding the task and finding the simplest way. You know, the fastest way between two things is a dot, or as a line, sorry. So let's say we have a location here and here, and then you just draw a line between them. Oops. What I'm getting at is there's a task for everything, and there's a simple way, and then there's a very complex you know, way to get to something. This is like complex way of getting to something right here. Depending on your task, you might need to do something that's complex, and complexity is just many simple things combined. Something I always say to everybody. But there's also a reason to make things very quite simple and have just the fundamentals. So I think I wouldn't say complexity is the best. I would say it only depends on what it is that you're trying to convey. I like my products when I use on a daily basis to be very simple and pare down just to the core elements, so that I'm not distracted by anything else. I can just go straight to the source. Because if I had to navigate something as complex as some of these film designs that I do, just to answer my phone, it would drive me nuts. I'd go crazy. So I wouldn't say that would really work in the real world. So, and a lot of the times the things that I design are really not pertaining to reality. And when you watch a fictional film that has, you know, fake stuff going on, it's just a matter of solving the tasks and requests of that false world. So it's all to the story. So I wish I worked on Minority Report though, because I think that's probably one of the most accurate versions of something that was created. And that just comes back to the story and then the film itself and the way it's designed. It's really actually quite awesome.
For the last question, then it says, the UI and data design course, I noticed a lot of the final projects look somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you don't want people to look at a piece and think that's from Ash's class. What can you recommend for current students to do that will allow us to best inject our own personal style or interpretation of the brief? AKA, how do you do your best to stay unique on projects and avoid reinventing the wheel? Mind mapping helps, but it can still lead to similarity.
Sure, exactly. And that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And I think that in regards to, say, my class, when you learn from me or from anybody, what I'm teaching you is like how to build a house, basically. You're going to follow along with me, and then you're going to understand the elements and then take them from there and go and find your own voice. Of course, you're going to, for the beginning stages, it's not like you're going to instantly be like, boom, I have style now. That's just not how it works. It will take time and investment of your own to then take the information and things that I've taught you and then find your own realm and find your own style. And your own style is really, like I said, is going to come from the years of doing the tasks that are asked of you when you're working on projects, and you're going to find your own rhythm and your own pace as you go through them. So I would say my best advice for you is the only way to get better at this stuff and to find your own voice is to just keep going. I know that's like not the best advice, and I'm very aware of that because I don't have another answer for you other than the answer I would give myself is if I wanted to have my own style, I would just have to continually learn and pull inspiration from everything that I can so that I can eventually develop my own style and create my own sense. But, to be completely honest, a lot of this stuff comes from the very basic things that I learned from Nick Campbell at Grayscale Gorilla, which is like using the primitive shapes and using basic things. But then I applied what I learned from there to the things that I learned from Dylan Cole's matte painting DVDs from Nomen and combining those. And these are all things that I did a long time ago when I first started to discover what I was interested in and building those things out. And so I would take all those elements, and a cool thing that I was able to actually show recently, I finally got approval from DARPA to show this stuff. And this is about 2 years old now, I think. But the whole class was designed around this and many other jobs that I haven't been able to show because of client confidentiality. But a lot of this stuff has been designed around projects that I've worked on that are actually exactly this. This is a user interface for a virtual situation that has to do with a cyber grand challenge for DARPA. And this is a massive job that I was a part of in helping construct this visual language and style and everything as well. And so it's very similar. As you can see, all the elements are quite similar. And the way that I executed this is quite similar. But the color and the palette and everything else is quite different. And then finding the meaning and the definition behind it. So, shifting the color, trying different things, taking risks and trying different styles and stuff. I think if you take my course and you're going to, you have the basic core elements of how I think and work, of course, you're going to have traits that are going to, stick you to my style. But as per my advice, and at the end of that, my goal for you is to eventually have you be able to discover what it is that your style is. And I might have claimed a lot of the territory myself just because I'm a bit of a beast. So I apologize because didn't mean to do that. But at the same time, there's plenty of room for everybody to have their own style and to find their own place in this stuff. And that just comes, honestly, like I said, to you just putting in the time, being optimistic, and finding your own style. And that comes from your taste and what you like. I have completely different tastes from you, and you're going to have different tastes from me. And that's going to, all in all, show who you really are and what your style is and all your aesthetics and all that stuff. So it's just time. That's all it is, really. So just putting in the time and discovering it, using some of the elements I taught you, but then also using elements that you're getting from other people too.
Cool. I said, yeah, that is the best advice, homeboy.
Awesome. I mean, I hope that works, thank you. And I wish there was a faster answer. I wish that if you took my class, you had a cool button, you could just hit it. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. It just takes a lot of time. If it took me years to find it myself, it's going to take you just as long, no matter what, no matter who you are. You just got to love it. And then you got to be fascinated by it and just go enjoy it. And my reason for teaching you guys this stuff is for you to take this stuff and go and create your own elements. And of course, there's going to be clones, and that's just part of it. That's part of learning. I've shared with you guys, of course, you're going to go out and have replications of me. But you can also, if you're smart enough and you work hard enough, you're going to be able to find your own unique style. You just have to want it, And for those that don't want it, they're just not going to have it, and they're just going to complain about it, and they're going to blame me or other people for their misgivings, and that's just unfortunate. That's midget-minded stuff. So, yeah. I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So, didn't get a lot of work done today, guys, but I answered a lot of questions. Really great questions, though, which I think are going to only help you and me and everybody else as I'm going to design the next course. Because, yeah, even just that last question, me trying to think about, well, if I teach you guys this stuff, you guys will have like a pathway to how I think and work and create these things, but will it help you be original in your thought process? So this is something that I have to really think about and think like, okay, how can I get you guys to think individually and have your own vision? It's very difficult, having original thought. It takes a risk. You have to be creative. You have to be problem solving. It takes many different ingredients to make oneself very, robust in thinking and problem solving and stuff. So awesome. So there's Andrew. What's up, Angie? Andrew, Droopy
brought a
Man.
Dorito chip.
Oh, there's the Dorito chip. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for being here. To all my students, you guys rock. If you guys are interested in more stuff, there's links to all the Learn Squared stuff as well. And we're developing, we're a new platform. We're working on everything every day. We're constantly working on improving and growing to help one another. And we're all constantly trying to make the best thing we can possible for you guys and for us as well. We're selfish as well. We want to make us better as well. So, but yeah, that's it. I'm going to bounce off now. You guys all have a great day. And I'll see you guys next week. We'll be sending out banners and Facebook stuff. And if you guys have suggestions on how we can make sure we get information to you guys as far as when we're starting this, when we're going to be having this on, and make sure we have like a group or something or some kind of like massive thing that we can all share, let us know. We can set that up as well and make it so that we can all be here and be learning and trying things and all that good stuff.
Cool.
Awesome. Cool. All right, guys.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys
Bye,
next
guys.
time.